This is Fyodor Dostoyevsky's The Double. I want to start by saying I didn't know that this was a film edition until after I bought it. I just saw it on the shelf, I saw the spine, and I was like, oh, there's a Penguin Classics version of The Double that isn't attached to Stories from the Underground. Notes from the Underground? So I literally picked it out, turned it around, saw that it was only £4 and bought it, and then only later I was like, oh. I guess in the back of my mind I did want to buy it because I saw a trailer for the Richard Ayoade adaptation 2 years ago. That's not what I was thinking when I actually bought it. So it is about a man called Yakov Petrovich Golyadkin who works as a government clerk in St. Petersburg. Some strange stuff starts happening in Yakov Petrovich's life, and essentially his doppelganger comes and just sort of infiltrates his life but does it better than he does. His double's better than him in every way. He's more humble, he's more giving, he's more conversational, he's less awkward, he's better at his job. Golyadkin kind of gets the feeling that actually his double is out to maliciously overtake his life. I have to say I found this not very accessible at all. The naming conventions, every character has like 4 names. Maybe I just need to read more Russian literature to get around that, but there wasn't any sort of explanation or relation between them, and it was just very confusing. Also the kind of social rules in that class and the general culture of, you know, working St. Petersburg at that time, I knew nothing about, and it doesn't really introduce you to any of that, it just kind of throws you in the middle of it. Fair enough, because Dostoyevsky was writing it at that time where everybody would know those things, but I just found it a bit hard to get into that way. This is possibly the least reliable narrator I have ever read from, besides Humbert Humbert. From the very start, the protagonist is called like our hero, just in the prose. It gives you sort of false expectations of what this character is supposed to be in the context of the other characters. On the first read, it was really hard to sort of pin down the relationships between people and the context of most things. Like at the start, Golyadkin's talking about some sort of plot to murder somebody, and then that vaguely comes up, but it's never explained. I don't know if a lot is lost in translation maybe, but I get the feeling that it's sort of supposed to be really confusing. It just adds the mood of never feeling quite safe with what's happening. It's really hard to read the parts about Golyadkin, especially when he's in conversation, because he flips his opinion constantly. Like he gets a carriage and goes somewhere, and when he's at the door he's like, oh, I shouldn't have come here. And also whenever he's talking to somebody, he uses their name every phrase, every sentence, he says their name again, and like, why? I can tell you why actually. It's because a lot of this is about identity, and I think subconsciously this character is forcing everybody else's identity onto them because he doesn't feel like he has one himself. That's the literary answer to that. Is this science fiction? Is it reality? There's a sort of very blurred line between that, because all of the other characters in this book can tell the difference between the two Golyadkins, but it's only when Golyadkin Senior, which is the protagonist, says, don't you realise that we look exactly the same? They're like, oh yeah, I suppose so. It's like Golyadkin is the only person that can recognise how much this other man is infiltrating himself and everything and sort of overtaking his life. Is he mad? Maybe, probably. Quite schizophrenic. There are mentions of him not taking some sort of prescribed medicine at some point. His sanity is called into question quite a lot, so it wouldn't surprise me if this was all in his head, but again, that's sort of adding to all of these questions about identity and how it can be deceptive. Like, is your identity tied up in your physicality? Because there are these two doppelgangers that are definitely 100% different, even though their mannerisms are the same and the way they look are the same. Is it in your thoughts, which for him are almost entirely innocent? There's never anything malicious or aggressive in his thoughts. Or is your identity in your actions, of which Golyadkin's are fairly questionable? When I first read it, I didn't really connect to it that well because of its form, and as an actual reading experience, it's just quite disorienting, and I couldn't really get a lot out of it. But on reflection, I'm learning to appreciate more sort of the deeper points of it. This is interesting. I haven't seen the adaptation. I would like to, because it's got to be very different to fit into modern cinema, I think. I've only read Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky and this now, and I'd like to see how it compares to his other novels, because I see a lot of similarities between this and Crime and Punishment in terms of like the protagonist being quite selfish and it being sort of an odyssey of him rather than anything around it actually being that relevant. This has been The Double by Dostoyevsky. Have you read it? Have you seen the adaptation? Do you want to read it? Tell me your thoughts. Bye.